For joining us today on America's Forum.
Hi, JD. Good morning.
It's good to have you here, Bob. Let's begin on the West Coast, specifically the aforementioned Murrieta, California. The other day, we saw citizens block
these, which have manufactured this crisis to begin with. We should have never gotten to this point. And, I don't think it's a really great idea for people to be obstructing law enforcement. But ultimately, isn't that what President Obama has been doing for the last 6 years? So, what goes around comes around. And if you think about it, under the single category of immigration, thanks to Obama's lax enforcement policies, JD, we don't have one crisis. We've got a bunch of them. You've got a constitutional crisis. You've got a chief executive who's bypassing Congress. Yes, you've got a humanitarian crisis. The kids are in fact, facing dangerous journeys north because they know they won't be turned back. And we even have a public health crisis emerging now because the folks coming in, the illegal aliens, have never had a vaccine or inoculation.
And we will be going.
Not have to be here. Obama has been playing politics with immigration. We are seeing the dramatic, chaotic results.
Bob, we should note that we will have an expert, a physician on contagious disease later on this same program. But let me go back to Murrieta for this reason, sir. Apparently tomorrow, ironically Independence Day, the feds say they're going to bring illegals to Murrieta again, this time with federal agents, increased law enforcement presence. How do you see that playing out on Independence Day?
Well, this is a president who has defied the separation of powers. Last week, this president basically gave the middle finger to Congress. Earlier the response by the Obama administration has been laughable, and I think it's frustrating most Americans. On Monday, JD, we watched a Rose Garden speech by Obama that was really a brazen and an unapologetic attempt to shift the blame from himself to House Republicans. And his tortured logic is we are having this border search of illegal aliens because he didn't pass amnesty, because Congress wouldn't pass amnesty. It's ludicrous. It was incredibly unpresidential and petulant and most certainly unconstitutional. I think the nonsense has to stop. Americans are frustrated, again, not necessarily the immigrants themselves. Yes, they are violating laws, and they are in violation of our laws, but they are acting irrationally.
Bob,
the president has systematically dismantled interior and perimeter enforcement for 6 years. So the bottom line is, if we don't care about our laws in the United States, why the devil should we expect illegal aliens to obey them?
Well, Bob, we know the president is headed down to Texas. We expect to get some more details on the details of his trip coming up later today from the White House press briefing. But what do you think is the one thing that the president absolutely must do to make it look like he's serious about this problem and serious at stopping this problem while he's down there along the border in Texas?
I think we're seeing a little bit of progress today, although Obama is being, dragged into it, kicking and screaming and reluctantly, and the reaction may probably be too late. We're seeing Border Patrol agents being pulled from the interior of the country to the border to handle the surge. But that leaves certain interior areas and the checkpoints, particularly in Arizona, porous, and many of those places are where the drug cartels operate. Obama is also moving immigration judges to the courts near the border, but there again, that weakens the removal process for the rest of the country. And then finally, we see today the U.S. is running ads in Central America telling illegal aliens not to come, and if they do, they'll be returned. But in that regard, man, there's a big difference between the messages they're putting out there and the present reality. Very few illegal aliens are being returned. So Obama needs to practice what he's preaching right now.
Bob, you made mention of the relationship or the lack thereof between House Republicans and the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Made mention of the fact that today a field hearing down in Texas for the Homeland Security Committee. Now, there has been some action on the Hill, but it doesn't receive the scrutiny that a president's visit would have. What do you expect to come out of the field hearings today for Homeland Security, and what legislation is out there being proposed in the House to help us get a handle on this crisis?
Well, look, they've got to do some fact-finding because the administration, turning away congressmen looking for answers, are trying to hide the evidence of this explosive surge. There is something Congress can do. Look, Obama created the crisis, and now, next week, when Congress comes back, Obama is going to go with hat in hand over to the Congress and ask for $2 billion. That's a big request. So right now, I mean, if politics is political gamesmanship, Congress might just have the upper hand right now, and a royal flush comes to mind. Congress has something he needs, money and lots of it, $2 billion. So maybe here's the deal they should make. Tell you what, we'll give you the money, Mr. Obama, to house and process these kids. But in return, you are going to guarantee most of them will be removed. You're going to stop abusing executive power. And before we cut you a check, we're going to start enforcing the immigration laws as we intended, and you're not going to interfere. The nonsense has to stop now. That's the upper hand Congress has. I think it's the play they should make next week.
So this comes down to writing legislation that would really leave no room for executive interpretation, because, as you know, Bob, the danger is legislation can be written in glittering generalities. Then it ends up over at the Department of Homeland Security, and Secretary Jay Johnson and his crowd of bureaucrats can interpret the statute and do it the way they want to. Does that kind of executive expansion of powers or further elucidation, doesn't that concern you somewhat?
Look, we have watched the power of the presidency, and I know you have for years when you were in Congress, steadily increase. But under Obama, we are watching dramatic power grabs that go far beyond established standards. Yeah, sure, lots of presidents have done executive orders, but an executive order has to clarify an existing law or reinforce the intent of Congress. It can't contradict it. Contradictorily, Obama's use of executive power in the past and those that he's threatening for the future don't meet those standards at all. His are simply maneuvers to reward the far-left voting base. That's pretty much the type of arrogant behavior you'd see from a dictator in a third-world banana republic.
Well, Bob, I want to go back to that presidential visit down to Texas. We know he's going there for fundraising purposes, but also he's had an invitation from Texas Governor Rick Perry to join him down on the border there in McAllen, Texas, maybe potentially visiting that field work today that the Congress is going to be doing down there. Well, let's put up a quote we have from Rick Perry talking about the fact he has not heard from President Obama. If this president of the United States is really serious about securing the border, we can show him how to do that, but I haven't even had a phone call from this president. We can't really expect that President Obama is going to call Governor Rick Perry, but what if he did? Would that change anything here at this point? Is it too little too late still, as you talked about before?
It may be too little too late, and plus the objective of this surge of immigration and the underlying problem for years now of lax enforcement serves the president's next transformation of America. First he did it with health care. He is doing it with immigration. No president has ever used immigration policy as a blunt political instrument to alter the electorate, to flood the country with low-skilled, heavily government-dependent people who vote, obviously not for Republicans, but for the party of big government. I don't know that 100 phone calls from 100 lawmakers is going to make much difference for this president. He's going to have to be taken to task. Congress could even get to the point. We may be at the point where Congress needs to convene an investigative commission to explore the president's abuse of executive authority, sort of a sequel to the old 1950s Commission on Un-American Activities, only this time it's the president who's being investigated for un-American activities using immigration.
Bob,
let's not forget one fundamental principle, and that is immigration policy. What we do with it, the limits, the terms, are all designed to serve our broad national interest, not cheap labor and not political party interest.
Bob, we're going to have to let you go. About 30 seconds remain. If concerned Americans want to get in touch with you or your organization, what website should they go to?
Thanks, JT. Yeah, we are on top of this and chock-a-block with information at fairus.org. Get informed and get involved.
Bob Dane, Communications Director for the Federation for Americans in Immigration Reform. We thank you very much for your time and your input.
Happy 4th of July.
It's coming tomorrow.
Interesting idea there, talking about Senator Joseph McCarthy and those types of hearings. I don't think he intended it to mean it exactly like that, but something needs to be done to further get to the bottom. He
was doing a historical allusion to House Un-American Activities Committee. This debate remains heated and is something we will continue to talk about straight ahead on America's Forum.